Overman Warrior Podcast.
Without electricity, life is so hard.
We need light for school.
The world can do better.
In rural villages, water must be carried by hand. In urban settlements, daily tasks are
Without electricity, we live in darkness.
You study by a tiny lamp.
We earn so little without power.
Hi, Rich Hoffman here. When you go see Senator Lang up in Columbus and you walk into his office to, as a constituent would, to talk about various issues, he has a number of books. He's the majority whip in Columbus for the Republican Party for the Senate. And he's a really good guy, and I could say lots of great things about George Lang for forever. But talking business here, when you walk into his office, the first thing you see on the left on a little table he has is this book. And he gives them out to members of the legislature. Anybody who wants one can get one. And this is something that I've liked about George Lang for decades and decades, is that he's an avid reader. He used to, a lot of people don't know about him, and I don't mind talking about it because I think he does a great job, and I like to talk about why I think that. Back in the 2000s, the 2010s, early 2010s, during the early days of the Tea Party movement, George Lang used to give out for Christmas voluminous copies of Atlas Shrugged. He'd hand them out to people as gifts. Like, you go to a doctor's office and the doctor gives you a lollipop or something, he just handed them out. He was very encouraging, and he wanted to teach people all he could get them to teach them, to share with them things he valued, and he often does it with books. And Atlas Shrugged was one of the books that he handed out over the years voluminously. And now, as the majority whip in the Senate in Ohio, he has the same practice, but he now is passing out many, many more books. And this one, Fossil Future by Alex Epstein. And I've heard of Alex quite a lot, and he does a lot of good work. He's a philosopher, testifies a lot. Capitol Hill has a lot of interesting opinions, and he's become a spokesman for fossil fuels, by evolution. And this is a book that essentially says the world is a lot better off with fossil fuels, and I'm going to talk about it a lot. It's a very layered book, a lot of details in here that's worth talking about. And a lot of people don't like to read, and they should read. And again, George Lang is passing this book out to people who want it. And when I was up to see him recently, on my way out, he's like, "Hey, take a book with you." And he's always good for that kind of thing. And it just so happens that I like to read 3 or 4 books a week. And so I don't think I'd have ever turned down a book when someone wanted to give it to me. Even if it was something, a subject matter that I'm not particularly keen on. I've even read anti-Trump books. Not because I agree with anybody, but I always like to see what people are thinking. So I read this one, not to be, I'm a baby drill kind of person. I think it was ridiculous to ever conceive that fossil fuels were going to be replaced by solar and wind. It's always made me sick. I go to some of my shooting competitions up in Greenville. I've gone to Greenville for years for various things, and they have wind turbines, 3 of them, that just kind of dot the skyline. Used to be in Greenville, Ohio, up in the Dark County. There was always kind of a small town mystery to the place, where Walmart was and where the fairgrounds were and different farms. They weren't always well seen. It's kind of a spread out community, and there's some big factories up there, and but you don't always know where everything's at because it's spread out over God's country, big sky country, is what I always call it. So you never knew where things really were in proximity to each other. You just saw this big, open, beautiful sky out in the plains of Ohio near the Indiana border. And that was always a treasure of Greenville. And now, no matter where you're at in Greenville, you can see these 3 wind turbines. So you know exactly where you're at in the town, and because you know relative to those because they've dotted the skyline and you can't miss them. So that's been a pressure push that's been coming from what they call renewable energy sector. It's been going on for a long time. A lot of people got suckered by it. I found myself in Columbus on many occasions. And a lot of times when I go there, I've bumped into lobbyists that are working the crowds, working all the senators and representatives, and they've been talking about this dump of fossil fuels for a long time, and then forcing society to go to renewables. And we saw what that did in California. The renewables couldn't keep up, so they had brownouts, and they couldn't keep up. The grid couldn't keep up. So there really hasn't been anything like nuclear. Nuclear is very good, clean energy, and it has the horsepower to give it to everybody all they need whenever they want it. So really, we should be, if everybody's that conscious of good energy, good clean energy, good powerful energy, nuclear should be what they'd be looking at. But no, they've been pushing these wind turbines, and they've been pushing solar. And I'm not against solar. I think it's great when you can go camping out in the middle of nowhere, put a solar panel outside your RV, and collect enough power to run your RV off the grid for 2 or 3 weeks. I think that's remarkable. I have several flashlights that can power off the sun, and then they're good for the night. And they're good flashlights. They work great. There's a lot of great technology coming out of solar. I'm not against it at all. I'm not against electric cars. I think Tesla makes currently the best car on the market anywhere in the world. And I'm not crazy if they're fancy golf carts, but they're so well engineered, and it's a viable push for market sustainability, and I think that's healthy in a capitalist environment. But what we're talking about here, and what I've seen in Columbus, and what's been going on with Alex Epstein talking about this in his book, and why George is passing it out, is energy policy. Should have never been derailed the way it was. We should have never been even thinking about getting off fossil fuels on any kind of short-term basis, because it was too needed for upper mobility for society. And when you peel back the Democrats and you listen to all those pinheaded lawyers that are up there lobbying for the renewables against the fossil fuels and changing the market, which we saw clearly out of the Obama administration. We saw it coming out of Biden's administration, because he was the auto-pin president and he wasn't in charge. It was all these crazy radicals, same ones I've seen in Columbus. Right? The reason why George Lang is passing this book out, to make sure people understand the best way to have a good society, and I think some of those powerful points made in Alex's book here, is if you want a good standard of living for people, then you have to give them access to fossil fuels. And the detrimental effect on the environment is an acceptable byproduct to what it does to upper mobility of human beings. So you find that the gap between rich and poor often is access to energy. If you have access to energy, you have access to the internet, you have access to information, and you do something with that information to expand the economy, then you tend to have a better society. But a lot of the planet, and that's the point made in this book, a lot of the planet isn't running, they don't consume enough energy to power a refrigerator. Most of planet Earth still doesn't have power to power a refrigerator. They don't consume that much power in a day. And that's not acceptable. Power means upper mobility, means better sustainability for the human race. And what you find when you peel back all the advocates against fossil fuels is that they had a subplot. Just like you find with the TSA issue with Democrats right now. They wanted unionized employees to regulate and be security for private enterprise airline industry, and then they won't pay them, and now they've caused a major problem. Democrats are full of these control mechanisms where from centralized authority they can either turn the funding off or turn it on and force change and movement. And that's what they try to do here with fossil fuels through the regulatory environment. And I talk all the time, and I know it's one of those sore spots with Republicans. I talk about First Energy all the time. And First Energy, I think, got a raw deal, and how the Obama administration went after them for all the reasons talked about in this book. All they want to do is keep a couple of nuclear power plants open, and regulatory environments made it so they couldn't run profitably. And they weren't getting any subsidies because they were all turned off, and that was on purpose to shut them down and bankrupt them. So they sought help by the Republicans to help us out. We're getting squeezed out, and we're just trying to provide power and energy, good power and energy through nuclear power plants. And in order to force the state of Ohio into renewables, those stupid turbines I said in Greenville that I saw being built over my time going up there went from being a very nice landscape to being an eyesore of these stupid windmill things blowing around. And you knew where the Walmart is, and you knew where the downtown was, and you knew where the fairgrounds were, based on seeing these silly 3 wind turbines dotting the horizon. And a lot of people thought that was a good idea. And Trump used to make fun of it by saying, "Can we watch TV tonight, darling? Is the wind blowing tonight? Can we run the microwave if the wind is blowing?" And he's being funny, but it's rooted in fact. It's inefficient. It's not the best way to get energy. Solar panels are not the best way to get energy. There's a giant solar farm just outside Lebanon, Ohio, that is just huge. And the first thing you think about when there's tornadoes that hit in the Ohio region, what happens when tornadoes come by and just destroy all those panels and high winds come around and knock them all, destroy them? What's that going to do to your power collection? I'm all for solar power on Mars, or nuclear power when you get set up these Mars colonies and colonies on the moon. You got to have some way of collecting power. The space station, the International Space Station, pulling in power from solar panels. That's very viable, but it's not the best form of energy, especially when you have choices. And when access to that energy needs to be done with over billions of people, and you're looking for upper mobility, fossil fuels is the way to get there. And that's the way to improve a lot of people's lives. And when you dig away the real root cause for why Democrats turn off TSA funding, or why they are against the Iranian war, or why they want fossil fuels eradicated, it's because they have a worship of the earth in an unhealthy way, and they believe in a religious way that they need to eliminate people from the earth. They need to not just suppress people from upper mobility, but to suppress them from existing. That's why they support abortion. That's why they're they want to return to the primitive in most every fashion. And they really want to have a village council where they get to be the leaders and everyone sits around a campfire and people resort back to living in tents and going out and hunting for a deer every day and spend all their time trying to eat for dinner instead of thinking about other things. Because once you have time to think upward mobility wise, and you have a society that can go to Starbucks and get a coffee, work a whole day at some job, making a new bowl for some industry, or tiles for floors, or whatever it is that you do. Those are luxury items for an economy that that goes outside the bare necessities. And Democrats have been trying to limit access to the bare necessities forever, so they can essentially wind down the human race. The transgender agenda. What's that all about? Not having families, not producing children, keeping people small so that we don't incur a huge tax on planet Earth. And the pressure to have fossil fuels so everyone can have upper mobility won't be there because they don't want to take from the earth, burn from the earth, They want to worship the earth. And that's it becomes a religion for them instead of a practical, how can we use the earth to make people's lives better? And so we don't agree. Nobody agrees. And that's part of the problem. So energy policy in Ohio, it was thankfully under Trump's administration going back where it needed to be. It will get better as the years go. George Lang, Senator Lang, is passing out books like this one so people get it. People can learn what they need to learn. And we're going to talk a lot about it because there's a lot to talk about as far as energy policy and how it's going to evolve over the coming years. But we should have never moved away from fossil fuels, and it's cost us a lot of extra money we didn't need. And there's a lot of people suffering in the world because of these policies, because there was an anti-fossil fuel war going on and people didn't have access to energy they should have had that would have made their lives much better. And so when you talk about rich economies are built around energy access. And if you want to help other countries in the world to have better access to upper mobility, fossil fuels are the way to get there. And this is a wonderful book. And I'm glad to see that there's great movements in the state of Ohio to preserve that. It needs to become more of a national thing. And Trump's policies are doing great while Trump is in office. But we have to set a future where this is going on for decades, not just a couple of years. So that's the trick. But a lot more to come on why fossil fuels are great for the human race and why we need to support them in a much more vivacious way. Starting with books like this one and good senators like George Lang, who are trying his best to let everybody know why fossil fuels are great for a good economy and for people to have good, healthy lives and have better health conditions throughout their lives, because energy is where everything starts from. It really is the game changer on autonomy of the human race and the positives that can come from it. Anyway, Trish Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
Thank you for listening.